Right, and welcome back. We have sorted out the cable between us and Holland. Apparently it was the Peach application and we hadn't put GB in. So I will now pass you over to Eric. Eric will talk through his slides and I'll just manipulate them from this end.
Okay. Thank you, Ram. A bit of a hiccup for the technical speech having technical problems then to start with. But click to the next slide, please, Robin. So I started Greenforce in 2016. I have worked before that. I worked for several breeding companies, in the flowers and goldsmiths. I started Greenforce for plant growing. I want to satisfy my hunger for why. So if you remember, little children always ask why, and that's their way of learning and learning quickly. I always ask myself the question why, because to better understand how plants grow and how we can influence the way of growing. I started Greenforce back in 2016 and started GreenSense, which is a plant monitoring system using sensors to log microclimates, to do some plant monitoring in ways of measuring plant temperature. Some probes into the potting to the root zone, and all that should result in growing it fast. Please, Robin. Most of the people might know me from my work for the breeding company Morel. So most people will probably know me for Cyclamen, but I also work. Next slide. I also work for a company, a compost manufacturer in Holland, where I do some product development with some of their customers on their compost. One interesting project that I'm working on at this time is to see if we can get some growth retardant through the compost on various crops. And in the picture here you see two types of pansies. It's the same variety, same sowing date, same potting date, everything, but just potted in a different compost. But the right one is normally PGR with the normal procedure of the culture. And the left-hand side is something that we did with the compost. It's mainly in starting feeding of the compost, and we are getting a lot more compact plants without growth regulators, or with less growth regulators. Next one, please. So when Chris asked me if I was willing to talk about challenges with green crops, I said yes, but I thought the main challenge at this moment in time would be to sell them. But from listening to Graham and Natalie earlier on today, I understand that should be a problem at all with all the things that you as a growers have in internet sales and anything like that. My talk will be technical issues with spring crops, but like very often is the case, most of what I'm saying will be applicable to other crops and other seasons. We will touch on plant balances, what I call the gearbox of plant growing. We will see why growing a spring crop is much more challenging than growing a summer crop. We will look at a few images. We will even have a pint of beer, have a shot of whiskey at some time, and finally touch on the biggest challenges of spring crops as far as growing is concerned. Next one, please. So plants. Well, Greenforce on the principles of growing by plant empowerment, and don't know if you're all familiar with that, but it puts three balances in place, where balances is the plant balance. So it produces sugar out of carbon dioxide and water. To do that, next one, please. To do that, to produce these sugars needs energy, and that energy is produced by photoactive radium. Next one, please. Another of the three balances is irrigation and nutrition, and the fourth one, next one, please. It's moisture, so air humidity is a driving force for and with evaporation, it's the driving force for plants to absorb nutrients from. So all these balance work together, and it works like a gearbox. Next one, please. So to make a plant, make the process start turning, you first of all need energy from a light source. These gear sprocket wheels, they hook into each other and only all turn at a certain speed. So if the energy is higher, will run quicker, and vice versa, please. Next one. Or as a German researcher, Justus von Liebig, expressed it, if you look at a barrel, the barrel can only be filled until the level of the highest bar. So if we manage to raise that lowest barrel bar, we can make the processes run smoother and more effective. Next one, please. What's the difference between crops and spring crops? Is summer crops are mostly in winter time and flower in let's say May, June. So they grow towards the light, and during the culture, temperature normally are increasing. Next one. Spring crops, on the other, until let's say somewhere in November, and they grow away from the light. Next one. But a big difference between summer crops and spring crops is that the huge difference in temperature. Temperature 50% lower than they are summer crops. It's around 10% of what the crops get in summertime. So the limiting factors here are the temperature and temperature for growing spring crops. Next one. So spring crops have very different energy dynamics compared to summer crops, and confront in often see is that we see some level of leaf yellow, if you like. So on the picture here, you see a crop of primrose that is just coming to some are a lot. Please. So if you look into a picture of that same variety, you see that the plants are coming into flower. Some plants are from the deficiency. So plants that are getting into flower contribute to
Eric, could I just
Eric? So therefore you start seeing deficiency when the plant comes into flower. Next one, please.
Eric, could I just ask you to switch your video feed off? We can just hear you, but only just. If you switch your camera off, I might be able to get better. Just a sec. So as long as we can hear.
Is it better now? I hope the sound is better now. On the picture now, you see a crop of ranunculus, and that's also starting to get into flower. And also here you see starting deficiency of nitrogen starts to develop at the bottom leaves of the plant. So with plants coming into flower in low light levels that are available to spring crops, you start running into deficiencies very easy. Next one, please. This is a picture I took in January from a Senecio Zanetti crop. Also here you can see a small flower bud developing, and some nutrients deficiency starting to develop. Deficiency of trace elements, really, and in this case nitrogen deficiency. Now this color might is hidden by cases of growth retardants, because you see that the older leaves are looking a bit darker, but there are some deficiency symptoms there as well. Next one, please. So if you continue growing a crop like that and run into deficiencies, it might result in a plant that looks really, really bad at point of sale, and might become very unattractive to sell. Next one, please. On the picture now, you see two Senecio Zanetti Magenta. One is the left one is potted in week 43, and the right one in week 45. The plant from potted week 43 is starting to show deficiencies, but also in the plant from week 45, you can see the first symptoms coming into the picture as well. So as a grower, if you start reacting on these deficiencies by feeding, you're too late, because the chances of toning up this crop from this stage till, well, the point of marketing, they're virtually not there. So why do these spring crops suffer so much from deficiencies, or why do we see these symptoms so often in spring crops? It's because of the low watering frequency that we have, and the low feeding as a result. So what can we do to overcome this? Just crank up the feeding. But how? Well, to try and explain how we can do that, I first want to have a drink with you. So next slide, please. So cheers to a pint of beer or a shot of whiskey. I often use this example to explain why concentration matters and why the concentration of applied feeding matters. Well, here's an example on volume and concentration. A pint of beer only contains 2.8 mils of alcohol, if you look at the volume of a pint, where a shot of whiskey has 14 mils of alcohol, although the volume is a lot less than with a pint of beer. So to get really drunk, you need to drink like 5 pints of beer and only the equivalent of 1 shot of whiskey to have the same alcohol volume into your body. So next slide, please. And that same applies, you can click once more, Roy. So the same applies to spring and summer crops. Whereas summer crops, you water like twice a week, and you will get something like 300 cc's per week into a pot that's water content. So if you fertilize these plants with 100 ppm of nitrogen, you get like 30 ppm in a pot on a weekly basis. Now, if you compare that to spring crops that are only like watered once every 2 weeks, you get only 75 cc's per week per pot. So if we would feed them with the same concentration of fertilizer, the same nitrogen content, it means that you would only get 7.5 ppm of nitrogen into that crop. So with the lower volume of watering, you get less feeding in there. And that is why you very often see the problems with deficiencies on spring crops. So in order to overcome this problem, you need to feed them with either a higher feed level or a higher nitrogen level. Next one, please. Next one. So, really, in a nutshell, to improve on quality of spring crops and to overcome deficiencies, you need to feed spring crops with 150 to 200 ppm of nitrogen with every watering. As a comparison to summer crops, you would feed them with 100 ppm of nitrogen, and that would be sufficient and not have any deficiency symptoms. Next one, please. So as a result of the higher feed of nitrogen, you might face some excessive growth that needs to be corrected with PGR treatment then, and not with feeding, because feeding would mean that you would start feeding less and that you would run into deficiencies later on in the culture. Next one, please. So the message really is that as soon as watering frequencies start to reduce, the feeding concentration needs to be increased. It needs to be in balance, so then the number of waterings needs to be corrected with a different charge of feed. Next one, please. So for spring crops, you could also choose the path of putting some controlled release fertilizers into the growing medium. But since temperatures are generally low during the season, the controlled release fertilizers will not provide enough feeding during the culture. So it can be in addition to the liquid feeding that you do. But I think the main message is that you need to feed spring crops at a much higher level than you would need to feed the summer crops. Well, really, this was the last slide. Really, sorry that it went a bit. I don't know how to say. Yeah, it went a bit wrong. I don't know what's happened with the communication here, but thank you for listening. I hope you still did get a few things out of it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric. Eric will hopefully appear in one of the sessions once we've worked out what's going wrong with the telephone line. Finally, this is the last theme of the day, so thank you all for listening so quietly. We're now off to the top tips crop session. You'll find the sessions on the left-hand side of your screen, and then just click on sessions and look in top tips and we'll appear there. But before we go, James has some inspirational words for us.
Well, I wouldn't say inspirational, Robin, but it's just a few more thank yous, really, because I just wanted to thank all our guests for joining us today, and hopefully you found it as fascinating as I have. Also, I would like to just, again, continue to thank our speakers, and also the sponsors of the event, namely AHDB, Cambridge HOK, Mole Seeds, and Beacon Camp Plants. So before we go, it's just for me to sort of say good luck for 2021. We sincerely hope you have a fantastic season, despite the ups and downs as to what we're going to expect for the coming year. And also, I very much hope that 2022 conference will be face-to-face. Much as I've enjoyed today, there's nothing quite like the sort of the fun and games of a real live sort of conference on a one-to-one basis. So, as Robin says, there will be another session for themes 4 and 5 running in due course. But in the meantime, thank you. Safe travel home. I know that won't be difficult. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you very much.